Michelle,
Daniel,
OG
OG
Rose.
Rose, and today, season two, and
It begins.
it begins. We're happy to be here, and thank you all for your support over the years. And we're just going to start. Michelle, what do you think about?
Well, I've been thinking about how in the online scape, there's the internet language and stuff, internet colloquialisms and stuff like that. Well, there's one of them that is romanticize your life, right? Which actually comes from probably very, more dense books and a very profound concept. But I was thinking about that, and it's a beautiful sentiment, right? Basically, just romanticize your life, see the beauty in it. Make a cup of tea, like a ritual kind of thing. Like make it beautiful, like make it romantic, like as if you're in a great romance with the universe and yourself and your life.
Mm,
But I was thinking about something that almost feels like a prerequisite to that, which would be to philosophize your life,
mm,
or to being able to, as I was talking to you earlier, to be able to philosophize any moment of your life or anything in your life or something like that. And I think why that may be important is because it can better substantiate what it means to romanticize your life. And I think that though obviously there is something that's kind of imagery or aesthetic based to romanticizing one's life, if it isn't again substantiated with a philosophical, then I think that it can potentially be empty, or it may not be. It may always feel like something that one doesn't know how to reach, when really it's very alive and like it's very alive and possible for any and every person. And I do think, like, I haven't done enough research on the romanticize your life movement, and not that there is such a thing, but maybe they'd have like some robust concepts,
right.
some
Yeah. Yeah.
robust
Yeah.
sort of thing to it. I mean, the concept could be that, yeah, like actually, again, anyone can do it. It's not out of reach. However, in a social media age, even things that are trying to like equip people and empower them on like a very quotidian level sometimes still make people like live vicariously through other people's lives or other people's romanticism of their life, versus romanticizing their actually romanticizing their life.
Yeah.
And but I think, like, to me, I guess I'm also sort of showing my cards that I think philosophizing your life is to romanticize your life. Like, I don't know that you can do one without the other, and so maybe it's kind of a nuanced point. But yeah, you couldn't really, I think, effectively romanticize your life if you didn't first philosophize your life.
Mm,
Because you'd have to have the philosophy of, what does it mean to romanticize your life? Why is that better? How do you actually achieve that? Is that lying to yourself? Like,
right.
there's so many questions that are involved in that concept. But I do think that philosophy is really important, and ideas really matter, and they do inform our lives, and they will inform our moments. And if we can romanticize them and feel like it's some great cosmic beautiful story that's unfolding, but we may not be able to access that if we are enclosed, as we talked about in our last episode of, or yeah, last episode of season one. So yeah, a lot
Yeah.
there.
Well, I mean, the first thing I guess that comes to mind is Charles Taylor talking about the end of enchantment
Hmm.
in the secular age, and there is a connection of the idea of secularism, empiricism, everything can be quantified in a loss of a certain enchantment in
Hmm.
life. And
Hmm.
there is a kind of, I mean, we see with Sam's great work at Romanticon, this
Hmm.
sort of new romanticism people are speaking of, this sort of recapturing of the ability to see life as enchanted. But, romanticism is not something where you can, flip a switch and, you know, be romantic again, right? Or have things be enchanted.
Well, honestly, though, that's kind of at least the way that the social media lingo is and the internet lingo is that you could. Like, that you could, if you just, I don't know, brought more awareness, made it pretty, like used a pretty cup or something, like, really, that there could be flip of switch moments that you could incorporate to romanticize your life.
Sure. I mean, then you'd need philosophy here to ask, is that true? Or
Mhm.
how is that true?
Exactly.
I mean, you certainly just adding nicer dishes at lunch could add a romanticism, right? Like just getting dressed in the morning could
Yeah.
make a big, big difference. But then there's a question of sustaining it. And how, really the challenge is making the subway romantic, making places
Mhm.
romantic that don't have that flair or that you don't set up, right?
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
that's a kind of
Mhm.
ability to be able to see
Mhm.
enchantment and
Mhm.
beauty wherever
Mhm.
you go,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Certainly, I think it is probably more like flicking a switch if it's your own home and things within your control.
Mhm.
But if you go into the world and you don't have that
Mhm.
control,
Mhm.
it might not be so easy, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, it's one thing to restore enchantment with people like you or environments you control, but what
Mhm.
about the global pluralism, the
Yeah.
person you disagree with, so on and so forth?
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and I think that's probably speaking to the I don't wanna say inadequacy because that's kind of a harsh word, because I do like the concept of romanticizing your life, but I think that why I feel the prerequisite of philosophizing your life is important is because romanticizing your life may not equip you to know how to encounter the other and have conversation. Actually, if you could learn I do think that philosophizing your life is going to equip you better to be able to have conversation. Like romanticizing your life, like I said, it falls a bit more into the aesthetic. Now that's also the medium. Like this is being
Right.
communicated about through social media. So it's going to fall in that, it's going to lean that way. Um, can you romanticize your conversations? Maybe, like, but I do think you'd have to be able to do the work of philosophizing to a degree to be able to have your conversations feel like we talk about like this beautiful like oh my gosh so much 2 hours went by and it felt like a minute this kind of you're in this other almost world with that person when you converse with them
Yeah.
that I think is why philosophizing one's life and knowing how to philosophize any moment or anything is important because then you could maybe infuse conversation with uh, romanticism, not romance necessarily, but there's kind of a romance with, like I said, the God or the greater force that can happen, and you feel it in conversation in like the geopedic, like
Yeah.
Javier and
But that
Joaquin
begs
and
the
I will talk
question of
about.
how do you do that and what do you mean? Like, so how do you do that and what do you mean?
Oh, on philosophizing your
Yeah,
life.
yeah.
Yeah. No, great question. Great question. Well, yeah, I do think that it's possible. I do think it's possible to do it. I think that it's possible for actually anyone to do it. Now, they first would have to ascribe to what we've talked about that philosophy is important, right? It
Mhm.
often gets relegated to some sort of stuffy institutionalism or some dense book. And yes, those things are motifs of philosophy. However, really philosophy is just to get curious again, to desire wisdom, to um, enjoy the play of thinking through ideas. However, a lot of times when you are presented with the idea of like, okay, how do I philosophize some quotidian topic or some small talk topic? There's sort of a sense of, oh, that's weird. Like nobody else is going there. I don't know what I think about it, and all of that. I do think though that if you can fight those sort of like fears you could do a process of philosophizing any moment by starting with maybe just some Socratic questions where you just sort of undo.
Okay, so you're doing the laundry. How do you philosophize the laundry?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you might start to think to yourself, okay, laundry, okay, what is laundry, like what is the act of doing laundry, what does it seem to represent or symbolize, what so there yes, laundry is just some task that we have to do. It seems that way. The beauty of philosophizing a moment like doing laundry or the repetition of laundry is start to see that there's something in the fabric of reality that requires repetition, that requires um, specifically to folding. There's something about folding that is taking some like you're doing the work of folding up. A lot of times we talk about unfolding. We talk about we have the course coming up at Parallax. We
Mhm.
talk about the stories unfolding, and perhaps like folding laundry could be a time or a moment to um, incorporate some sort of physical act of like folding things back together, almost like it reminds me of wrapping presents too, or something like that. There's something about r- folding up clothes that is putting them back in sort of a state by which they're going to be unfolded again, and the only way that they get unfolded is because of life and because you're putting them on a body and because they're going to be like a living being through moving through space.
Okay, well, what about the dishes? How do
There's
you
just
philosophize about the dishes?
um well that one feels even easier honestly than laundry because for the act of doing dishes is to wash. You're washing dishes and all of these kind of tedious tasks that we used to actually have much more of. We had more mending, we had more repairing these things. Like it took our physical presence and attention on doing the work of facing that which needs to be cleaned, and we were cleaning it up ourselves. Even dishwashers like usurp that a little bit from us. But that's a humble reminder, like doing dishes. For me, to philosophize doing dishes is to think about why do we do dishes? What is the act of doing dishes? It's a particular act, and it's something that you have to also do repetitiously, and it's incorporating a level of cleaning that which is dirty so that you are able to use it again. And I think there's something about the ability to be in that position of really just cleaning something and having to redo and wash over, that is almost like a reminder of like this is what it means to be human.
Okay.
Like
What
it
about like salt? Like philosophize salt.
philosophize salt. Okay. Well, I mean, you could think about the properties of salt. You can think about like the value of salt in the past. There were wars that were fought over salt. Um, I mean, when you think about using salt, why do we use salt? We it gives flavor, it gives minerals to our lives. Um, so when we encounter and use salt, it's going to be something that is both like it's a proportion thing with salt. I think about it that way. Maybe something that we could learn from salt. And maybe that's the underlying question. It's kind of like what are the things we learn
Mhm.
from these tasks, from these quotidian things that we just do? Do we just do them? That's the thing. If you just get too much of like, oh, I just have to do the laundry, I just have to do the dishes. Yeah, it becomes kind of just mere drudgery, you know?
Yeah, because the overall question is what exactly are you doing? In a
Mhm.
funny way. Like, what are you doing when you philosophize? Like,
What is the act of
what
philosophizing?
do
Yeah.
you do when you philosophize about laundry or cleaning the
Mhm.
drapes
Mhm.
or weeding? Like, what's happening in
Mhm.
that moment? What do you
Mhm.
think? What is happening in that moment?
Well, I mean,
What do you feel? I mean, it's kind of a feeling question. What do you
mhm.
feel your mind doing
Mm,
when you
mhm.
do that?
Well, it's interesting too, the feeling of how it goes when you're being, intentionally asked, almost like put on, in a
Yeah,
sense, put
sure.
on the
Put on the
spot
spot. Absolutely.
about a particular thing versus when you're just doing the action and then you think some of these thoughts come to your mind. Now we may have more of that happening because we just regularly. We regularly invite philosophy into
Hmm.
our lives by, reading, asking questions, listening to stuff, thinking about symbolic meaning of this, that, or the other. But anyone and everyone can do that. And many people actually do have these thoughts, but they maybe just don't give them maybe as much attention, right? Like
But
depending
why give them attention? Like,
why.
why? Yeah. And what does that have to do with enchantment?
Yeah. Well, I do think it enchants things because, you were talking about this. So again, putting on the spot versus it organically occurring does feel different. However, there's still an element of like a challenge and a play in thinking, yeah, how would I philosophize salt? But what that does is at first it can feel this is the thing. If you can push past the uncomfortable feeling, you can start to actually get to a place of this is interesting. Like that's hmm, there's something there that it gets more playful, it gets more interesting. I mean, I already used that word, but this is the thing. I think a lot of people lack interest in their life. Like there's just a lack of interest in the mundane. There's a lack of interest in the doing it again. Like we talk about this phrase, we have a phrase of doing it again. And I think this is why to philosophize about it can reinvigorate life, new thinking, speculative considerations on these mundane tasks, because they're not just mundane, they are life itself.
Right.
Like they are so core to our existence. And the fact that we so easily can let them fall into drudgery is almost a loss, like because we could see them and experience them in a totally different way.
Well, so there's a few things. Heidegger has that idea that you don't notice a doorknob till it breaks, right?
Yeah.
So there's a way in which most things in life are invisible.
Yeah.
Leibniz has this idea where philosophy is about making the ordinary strange again. Um,
Exactly.
so there's this idea that you break something to notice it.
Yeah.
Um, what you could argue is when you had givens, what Charles Taylor is talking about, then enchantment was given. It was part of reality. So
Hmm.
it was part of the background.
Hmm.
Reality just was enchanted because there were angels and demons and magic and whatever. But now it's not there. Where there's something in that Heidegger example where you notice a doorknob when it's broken, but that means you can fix it.
Hmm.
So, if there's a way in which life has lost enchantment, then it has to be made visible again in order to fix it back into enchantment.
Hmm.
But there's a really tricky thing here because how do you re-enchant? So, once something loses enchantment, it's kind of like Wittgenstein said that repairing a tradition is like repairing a spider web with your bare hands.
Hmm.
Like it would seem as if re-enchanting reality is like repairing a spider web with your bare hands. But if you don't even know it's broken, you're not going to do that. So there's something about philosophy. that is breaking the salt out of everydayness and its
Mhm. Yes.
invisibilityness. You're breaking
Yeah.
things in order to see them,
And the whole.
and it feels silly to do.
Mhm.
But it's funny, like you said, you do something that feels silly in order to make everything around you playful, right? In
Mhm.
order to play with it, to make it alive. So
Yeah,
you do something
exactly.
silly to play.
Mhm.
So when you're philosophizing, there's a way in which you're breaking the invisible, just kind of flow of
Mhm.
phenomenon
Mhm.
around you to notice them. And the idea here is there's something about doing that that is um, possibility of enchanting reality
Mhm.
again.
Mhm.
The question is why? Why
Mhm.
does philosophy enchant
Mhm.
reality?
Mhm.
Why is this asking what is salt? How does it relate
Mhm.
to bigger questions? Why does that bring enchantment? And why does
Mhm.
that and what else does that do for you as a person?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, no, that's those are great points. I was thinking about this idea of like things being enchanted already, and then once it's
Sure.
not enchanted, how hard it can be to re-enchant.
Yep. Yep.
I guess I was just thinking of like, has anyone ever organically initially felt the enchantment of folding laundry? Like life in general, yes, but for me, so I'm just trying to think about it.
For many wisdom traditions, no. You have to go to a lot of
I
spiritual
think though
practice.
somebody held the place for you. Somebody paved a way. Like for example,
Hmm.
I think about there was something so pleasant in my childhood of it was particularly or typically on a Saturday morning when I'd kind of, you know, wake up with my twin sister and sleep in a little bit because there wasn't school to get to, and you know, lackadaisically come down the stairs, and my mom would be, you know, folding laundry, and we'd sort of sit with her, speak, or maybe even jump in. As we got older, we did, and that was enchanting. So the act itself of folding laundry, perhaps not so much, but in a sense, the relations that were around it, which often work has been very communal in most, you know, for much of human history. It's only really in more modern times that we've delegated and, you know, basically outsourced a lot of that work to whether it's machines
I
or
mean, there's a number of anthropologists who talk about how a lot of these home tasks in the age of the isolated home, because it used to be everyone would get
yep
together to do the
to do it.
laundry, the
Yep.
cooking,
Hmm.
that has
Radically,
changed things and made it
absolutely.
much harder, made
And
that up.
much more like a
Yeah.
drudgery, even though
Hmm.
we kind of have less work than we ever have
Yeah.
you know, in human history. We
Hmm.
don't have to work as hard as
Hmm.
many of our forefathers and foremothers. But yeah, I think that I guess I'm just thinking about this where the enchantment comes in the fact that there's life itself, there's relations themselves, and that's enchanting, and that's a beautiful thing. That's why for me, I don't know.
But for
I
most people, relationships are not enchanting. So what happens? They're terrors, right? People try to
Mhm.
avoid them.
Yeah,
So,
and that's the thing too, like, if you've got somebody like, you do the laundry?" Like, it's not an enchanting experience. It's not initially it may not even initially be an enchanting experience.
so how does philosophy make relations enchanting again?
Well, and that's the thing. I do think that why it's so important, even though it seems almost a stretch to make this claim about, you know, this idea of romanticizing your life by philosophizing your life, therefore being able to see doing the laundry as something beautiful. But why that matters is because, again, to speak to this idea of my perspective from childhood, where I had the, you know, if you want to say the privilege of experiencing it in an enchanted way because of my mother, right? Um, Therefore, it shows that it's actually always relational anyway. Like in the sense that how we relate to things is also going to impact, or tasks is also indicative to, to how we would also relate to human beings. Not because human beings are tasks, but I'm just saying that it's a skill of relation. I think that
So what do we
philosophy can fortify
So what do we
and
think
increase.
comes first? That people can't see enchantment in laundry and then their relationships suffer, or something breaks relationships and then they can't see enchantment in laundry?
Hmm.
What comes first?
Well, it would really depend on the particular
Sure,
situation,
sure, sure, sure. I would argue most of the time there's a relational break
and
that
that's why they
leads,
kind of
yeah.
hate the
Because you
task.
could even say, yeah, you could even say that the death of God is the death of a relationship, right? Like,
Hmm.
because like
Hmm.
when you say reality loses enchantment, I would argue that is tied to people feeling like they no longer relate to nature because it's a cold mechanical process that's leading to a heat death, right? Like when you believe in God, then nature is alive and you participate in it. And so, Dr. Segal, Matt Segal talks about Whitehead and participatory. So you could argue the loss of enchantment is the loss of a feeling of participation. And I think basically, as I understand the new romanticism that Sam's working on. It's tied to a feeling like you participate again,
Mhm,
like that man and nature and
mhm,
all things are participating in one another in a certain
mhm,
gestalt.
mhm,
So I think the question is, why do people feel like they don't relate to the world around them? Well, the death of God, sure, but there are a lot of people who believe in God who nevertheless don't feel like reality is enchanted
mhm,
around them.
mhm,
It's probably because of personal relationships have broken down,
mhm,
or
mhm,
there's tension or
mhm,
iciness or
mhm,
something. So
mhm,
so if philosophy can somehow re-enchant, it's probably going to, well, philosophy is going to have to somehow re-enchant relationships or
mhm.
help fix relationships. So how does it do that? And then I guess the question becomes, I know we talked about this before, but like how is that act of looking at salt and philosophizing about salt actually somehow the same skill that you need for your marriage or for your friendship? How
Mhm.
is that the same skill?
Mm. Well, I think that so that was all really, really great, Daniel, and I appreciate that. I think that the skill relates because it's a suspension of judgment, right? It's a stepping back and saying, I know what salt is. I use it without even thinking about it. Why would I ever think about it beyond its use, right? But then you step back and say, what is salt? It's a Socratic thing. It's a
Mhm.
Socratic, let's, what is salt? Then you give a definition, then you ask, well, what does that mean? Then what does that mean? And I remember us having a long walk on the farm when we were just married. And I remember us doing, like, it was a wonderful experience. I mean, I basically got grilled by Daniel Socratically, just what is this? And what is a tree? I gave a definition. Then he asked me what is something that I had defined. And it was just this complete unraveling. And it was almost like mortifying, but also exhilarating at the same time. And that's why I think to ask what is salt, right? Or to philosophize why does that help you with your relationships is because you start to suspend your judgment. You already have a judgment about a person. You already have your worries about a certain person. You already have, you know, all your things that you already feel like but it makes you say, well, maybe I don't know that so much. Or maybe I wonder what this, or getting curious. Getting curious is huge in terms of helping your marriage, helping your friendships, helping your relationships, helping your relationship to your parents. It's going to be huge because if you start to get curious, you also become, it humbles you to not just be assuming and then being trapped, enclosed in your misery.
Well, I mean, so when salt becomes invisible to you, then there's no other possibilities of what it is or what it could teach you,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So if you have a relationship that feels dead or there's nothing you can do, then you need more possibilities. So you need to shake it out of its
Hmm.
frame, shake
Hmm.
it out of how you think about it.
Right. And I don't know. I mean, maybe somebody who really does like kind of say like have like kind of a philosophy. I'm a philosopher, kind of like that. I teach philosophy, whatever. Might say, well, I don't know what they would say. They might be like, yes, everything you're saying, yes. But there might be some people who be like, well, that's just merely curiosity, or that's merely why I do think it's fair to use the term philosophy is because it's what does the word mean, right? It means to love wisdom,
Yep.
and the thing is that wisdom is there's something that is related between love and wisdom,
Yes, there
wisdom
is.
and love. With
Mhm.
wisdom, there's also love. With love, there's also wisdom in that sense, in the sense that that's the best, like true wisdom, and is going to be in, I want to say almost the most loving thing. And experience does love. It won't doesn't mean it's always like can feel harsh sometimes, but there's also this core of love in wisdom. And
Philosophy.
and and so just one thing, if we're talking about this philosophizing your life to romanticize your life, then it's going to be related to love. And so loving wisdom is the ability to say, wow, wisdom can make my life incredibly better, feeling more love for life and for, myself or, those in my relationships. Like it's just so crucial. So I do think that's why philosophizing is a very fair term to use here. And is what we're asking what is this act of philosophizing in the first place. I think it's why it's relevant here.
Well, philosophy starts in wonder. The moment you
Yeah.
wonder about the salt, you're doing
Yeah.
philosophy. For Deleuze, philosophy is playing with ideas. The moment you shake something out of its immediacy, you're engaged in philosophy.
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, to the degree you do it well, would be to the degree you have a method, you
Hmm.
can follow the thought, you're
Hmm.
not overwhelmed by the anxiety. I
Hmm.
mean, there's a question of when do you do philosophy and when do you do it well? I mean, I would argue most college professors teaching philosophy are actually not teaching philosophy, they're teaching the history of philosophy. Also, too, when you talk about wisdom, there's something about wisdom that is the acknowledgement that you should not accept things on their immediacy, but
Mhm.
it is dangerous not to. There's a
Exactly.
double
There's like
move going on.
exactly.
Yes.
That's what I was gonna say too, this idea of breaking something out of its isness or
Immediacy.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, its immediacy. Well, the funny thing is we break things out of their immediacy all the time with our judgments.
Yes.
So you're
Exactly.
doing it anyway. Like
Yes.
that's the key thing. Like you're doing this anyway. You're already philosophizing. You're already doing this. That's why when you bring awareness to that and it an awareness and a consciousness to, okay, philosophizing. What is that? Why would we do that? Why does that even matter? Why should you be doing it actually? Well, you should because you are. And
Yeah.
when you realize that, then you can do it better. You can do it in a way that actually frees you or improves your relationships, improves your relation to reality. So,
Well, I mean, for Hegel and Dr. Nicholas Philippe has made this point is philosophy is about making the implicit explicit. So what you're doing is bringing into awareness that which is an operation.
mhm,
So it's
mhm,
not like you're
mhm,
making anything new. Like a lot of people think philosophy is just adding difficulty. You're making things more complex. No,
mhm,
you're not making anything more anything. All you're doing is articulating what is the case.
mhm, mhm.
So if you don't do that, then you're just going to be at its mercy. You're just
Right.
going to be carried along by it. And this happens in
Exactly.
relationships all the
Exactly.
time.
Mm,
Like people are carried along by mechanisms and things happening in relationships and they don't know why and they just get carried along.
mhm,
Yeah, because you never make the implicit explicit. And
mhm,
philosophy is about doing that. And I mean another way to look at this is kind of like aperture.
mm, mhm,
Um when you take things on its immediacy like the salt or laundry or your relationship, let's say this is the range
mhm,
of consideration, this size. You better hope that the best outcome or best choice is within that range.
mhm.
But the probability that it's in that range versus a wider
Right.
range is lower, right?
Yeah.
So the wider you can extend your aperture, the higher the
Yeah.
probability the best way to look at something or the best way to think about something or the best choice will be available to you. But if you open it too wide, you get overwhelmed, right? So philosophy has this opening the scope to increase possibility, to increase choice, that increases the probability of the best choice, but you need to do it in a skillful way so you don't get overwhelmed.
Mhm.
And there's an argument to be made that re-enchanting reality requires that because if things are not enchanted, then you need to open the scope, open the way you see them to then make them alive. Because yeah, so if nature is not enchanted, then you kind of need to open it up,
Well,
right?
mhm,
And there's a way in which when you possibility also makes things feel dynamic and like they're alive and moving. So
right.
as you open up
Mhm,
the salt and all the
mhm,
dimensionality comes out, it
mhm,
feels more alive.
mhm,
Therefore, it feels like it's dancing.
mhm.
Well, if your relationship feels bad, if you could open it up and make it feel dancing and alive, that
Yeah.
would do a lot.
Oh, it go a long, long way. Long, long way. Well, I think that's a great, metaphor of the lens and the aperture and all of that because there's also times when philosophy really zooms you in really, really, really.
Mhm,
It's the kids were playing with a microscope, so then it's like, oh, look at this! This is so cool. Like they're looking at some fabric and they're like, looks like a constellation, which is funny because constellations are so big up there, and yet it's like in the micro of
mhm.
this fabric. Um, but so philosophy does that too. It's able to zoom in, zoom out, zoom in, zoom out, but it does do this thing of like, let's look at a it does feel like it does do the wider aperture to because you're doing a meta move, right? And you're doing that, which frankly kind of feels a little absurd, right? Like
Yeah,
to
yeah,
even
yeah,
receive the question of like, well, what about how would you philosophize salt? It's like, there's
yeah,
almost like this,
absolutely.
okay, but then you're like, okay, well, philosophy is able to actually that's a mode. So that mode is going
Yeah,
to engage with
yeah,
any and every single
yeah, but
thing.
most people's relationships are stuck because 'cause it'd be absurd to try that thing, or it'd be
Exactly,
absurd to
exactly.
do I've tried, I've done
I've
this,
tried.
right? Yeah,
It'd be
that's
absurd that
game theory because the
mhm.
only way to
It
ever
could
get
be
out of
absurd that it's that simple.
yes, and the only way to get out of rational impasses or
Mhm.
Nash equilibria is to do what's non-rational, is to do that which seems absurd.
Exactly.
So if you're like, man, life's meaningless and it's
Mhm.
unenchanted now, well, if you just look at rational options, then you're not going to make it better because they're part of the framework that has made it this way.
Mhm.
So the only way you deal with problems that being rational got you into,
Mhm.
your good ideas, your good thinking, is to do that which seems silly. So
Mhm.
the practice of saying what is salt,
Mhm.
philosophizing about salt, which has no relation seemingly to relationships, is actually the skill and habit that can help
Exactly.
you break out of
Exactly.
enclosures in relationships.
Exactly. And absolutely. And that's why you really should. You really should practice philosophizing every moment. Or, I mean, sure, it can feel exhausting if you don't typically do that, but you could start small. You could do it, take
Well,
some
if you
time.
don't do it on salt, then when you're angry or mad
Mhm.
about something in a
Yeah.
relationship, you're not gonna do it there. So
Yeah.
doing it about the
Oh, yeah.
small things builds you up to the big things.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Like,
And
if you can't philosophize about salt, you're not gonna philosophize about freedom, and
mhm.
then you're not gonna philosophize about your husband.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Exactly.
the relationships are the hardest thing. The big metaphysical, quote, unquote, "concepts" like freedom and justice are easier to philosophize
Mhm.
than
Mhm.
about
Mhm.
marriages.
Maybe we think we already do philosophize about relationships because we do a lot of thinking in our heads about, well, they think this and they did that. And so it's funny because it's like you're spending a lot of energy in your head, not in the right way though.
But
It's like literally using your energy in your head in the I want to say almost in the wrong direction. And that's where philosophizing is like, oh, like stop. Let's go in the let's do this work, but in the correct direction.
Well, this is the funny so philosophers tend to be accused of thinking so much. Why do you think so much? The issue is you're already thinking too much. Like, you're thinking too much. Whoever you are, you're thinking too much. Like, you can't stop it. The voice is going on. Philosophy is simply owning the fact that you're
Yes.
thinking as a kind of problem.
Yeah.
Like, and thus it makes it visible, and thus it seems like it does it more.
Yeah.
Like, philosophy thinks about thinking, therefore seems to think too much, when really everyone thinks constantly, but they don't make
Exactly.
it visible. It
And there's
becomes in the background.
and
It becomes implicit, never explicit,
mhm,
and so they're never free. Because in Hegel,
mhm.
the only way to be free is to make the implicit explicit, and the philosopher is making their thinking explicit. Therefore, it seems like they think too much,
Mm,
when
mm, mhm,
really it's just because they're making it explicit
mhm,
in order to be free,
mm,
in order to re-enchant the world, right?
mhm.
So philosophers just they think about thinking because if you don't, it's a problem.
Right, and they realize you're already thinking.
Yeah, and you're already doing it. And if you're not doing it, if you're not thinking, that's bad. So but that's a temptation too, because it's like, well, then I won't think. And you get, you turn off your brain and you get taken advantage of, or you're not able to make good decisions, or you get drunk on pleasure or whatever. Like,
Mhm, mhm.
if the way to address thinking is not to not think, that's a problem. It's to think about thinking.
Yeah,
But
exactly,
then doing
exactly.
that destabilizes you.
Well, and I do find too that this is definitely a muscle. I mean,
Yes.
this is definitely a muscle, that you can strengthen, absolutely can strengthen, and it will benefit your life, um, because it's interesting how quick how to put to me, I find that doing this sort of thing is actually it's one of the things that makes life so exciting and interesting and conversation so rich, like so potentially rich, right? Um, but if everything's kind of kept in that like low order causality, like that, like
Yes.
for lack of a better way to say it, I don't know, that low order, it's not it's difficult, it's difficult to have a conversation that kind of goes in more multifaceted directions. And I do think that a lot of the reason why it does not that we may not allow ourselves to do it is because one, we may just not have known that we can, or
Yeah.
we
Oh,
don't
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that we can, we don't know that we're allowed to, we don't know how to do it, like we feel afraid to make a mistake, we feel afraid to
Yes.
look foolish, um and so people just don't end up doing that because again they may not even have the structure, or not the structure, but well, it is a type of structure. You could literally just ask yourself a certain amount of questions about something and it start to at least get the ball rolling on thinking about something, and maybe it won't go anywhere, but it was an exercise nevertheless. And then you do it about something else, or you think about something else, and the more you kind of exercise that those muscles, you train yourself to be able to do that more. And I do think, again, this is why, I don't know, just to add or to say, like, as a prerequisite or as an enhancement or substantiation of romanticizing your life, I don't know if one wants a romanticized life where they're alone on Instagram. Like they've romanticized it from the aesthetic, but they don't. If you're not able to have like the sense of community, the sense of conversation, the ability to encounter difference, to know how to have conversation, which does require, again, philosophizing for the sake of breaking things out of their fixed certainty, and how you know them to be. Yeah, I just don't know. I think that there's a almost a missed opportunity there, where it could be even richer. It could be even more um, romanticized, if you will.
Well, there becomes a question of, when is something romantic? What does it mean when you experience something as romantic or enchanted or
Mhm.
so on
I
and
like
so
that you
forth?
use that word, by the way.
Romantic.
No, enchanted.
Enchanted,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I think relationships feel intimate when they feel enchanted. I
Hmm.
think intimacy, if you want intimacy, you need curiosity.
Mhm. Mhm.
Bringing curiosity into your marriage about one another is to
Mhm.
make it feel intimate. This
Mhm.
is why ideas are about intimacy. Now, that phrase means many things because it's tied to Lacan, it's tied to Dante, it's tied to Eros, beauty, and so on and so forth. But basically, you are not going to have intimacy with people that you don't feel curious about.
Mhm.
And it's going to be very hard to have curiosity about them if you're not able to break them out of your immediacy, break them out of your judgment, break them out of your understanding. And that
Mhm.
requires opening the aperture. But then you also have to be willing to face the possibility of being wrong.
Mhm.
And that's one of the key reasons why people don't break up their immediacy is because they might be wrong. Yeah, you might be.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's constant, basically, like we've talked about this before, a lot of times conversations are, um,
Trivia.
basically, I mean,
Trivia
for the last,
games.
a lot of times they can fall into just trivia games or, fact checking. Um,
Yeah, what'd you do today?
yeah,
Who did this? Blah blah blah. It's just
yeah, and
trivia.
then it
Like
can end up being gossip because
yes.
they don't know, if
Hmm.
you don't know what to talk about, you talk about other people because you,
Yeah, if you
so
I mean, that's
it's,
another issue. If you don't
yeah,
talk about ideas, you're gonna talk about people.
yeah, yeah,
It's almost inevitable.
yeah. But I do think people are hungry for ideas. I think when people,
Well, that's the other thing because, yeah, philosophy accepts that people are hungry for ideas, and if you
they
don't
are.
think them, you're still going to have them,
Hmm.
and you're still going to look for them, and they're going to be bad and
Hmm.
possibly judgmental and destroy your relationships.
Exactly, it's Ouroboros,
Yeah,
that type of hunger,
yeah,
right? Which is the self-effacing.
auto-cannibalism. Yeah,
Exactly,
mhm,
exactly. And I was also thinking about the term enchanting. It's funny because in Spanish, that's a very common way to say, like, nice to meet you, is to
yeah,
say, like, it's actually the word for enchanted, to meet you. Like, they still use that
mm,
in Spanish or
right,
some Latin languages. But why I wanted to bring it up, or to look at it a little bit more and see, this is an act of philosophizing, in my opinion.
yes.
So you say, okay, you use that word, that's interesting. Well, that's a very fitting word, but there's also, like, we're just discussing more on
Yeah,
that.
you're
We're
shaking the
zooming in on
word
that
out.
word
Yeah,
to kind of
mhm,
expand and
mhm,
expand it further. It's
yeah,
like tapping on a hyperlink or
yes,
something like
yes,
that. So that's what philosophizing feels like to me. And for me, this word is interesting because if we don't kind of get a good sense of how to enchant our lives, because we actually desire that, we desire mystery and the beauty and the excitement and the adventure, then we end up, because the other connotation with enchanted is spell, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
yeah,
the kind of
yeah,
bad
yeah,
magic type of
yeah,
stuff, and it's like, we want to participate in the divine mystery, not the bad magic. We want to do the divine mystery.
right,
And so if you aren't doing the work of developing the muscle of philosophizing, I think unfortunately you can end up really entrapped in enchantment and
yeah,
then be completely,
under a spell.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
basically, like, you're under, and you feel very trapped. You feel very like you're always hitting a wall. You feel kind of stuck. I
yeah,
think that's
yeah,
bad
yeah,
enchantment, and
mhm,
it's like a
mm.
perverted version of what we desire to live out and can live out.
Yeah.
So anyway, I
No,
just want to bring that
I
up.
think that's very good.
Yeah.
You definitely feel like you're under something
Hmm.
if your relationship is stale or your job is stale or life is stale. You feel
Yeah,
like you're
yeah.
under
You can't.
something, like
Mhm,
a
mhm.
spell, like a
Exactly,
principality.
exactly, and that's where it's like that line, "Well, I've tried talking to him," like,
Yeah,
thinking about
yeah,
in
yeah,
marriage, "I've tried talking to my partner," whatever it
yeah,
is, like,
sure.
or, "I've tried doing this, well, that's what is that language? Under a spell. You're just
Yeah,
you keep on being stuck,
yeah,
and,
yeah. So you need
whereas,
to open the aperture.
yes,
You need to
exactly,
break
you need to
up
break
the
through, yeah,
immediacy.
and breaking soul out of its immediacy is actually gonna end up breaking you out of
Yeah,
your, bad enchantment, to be able to engage in the enchantment of life, where
yeah.
you get to start to enchant life in a beautiful way.
I think there's also parts where people don't do this because they're hurt.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
reality is not enchanted because you're hurt,
yeah.
and to
And it's
re-enchant it, you'd
scary.
have
It's,
to
yeah.
go into that hurt.
Mhm.
People feel like the other person should just get it. Don't they know better? People
Mhm.
are
Yeah,
wounded, and wounded people wound.
yeah.
And this is also why I think if philosophy is the love of wisdom, I do think it can be very helpful to think of philosophy as the psychoanalysis of wisdom,
Mhm.
because the psychoanalysis gets into these various ways we get hurt, we enclose, we
Mhm.
self-deceive.
Mhm.
That's also part of this.
Mhm.
Irony is part of this. No one intends to be under a spell, but
Yeah,
they end up
exactly.
under a spell.
Exactly.
But you see, here's the issue: if there are all these mechanisms by which we end up in lives we don't want,
Mhm.
then you need to be at any moment and regularly able to open up the aperture, to
Yes,
break up the
practice.
immediacy.
Mhm.
Because if at any moment and constantly you can fall into something you don't want to end up in,
Mhm.
then you really need to it's going to have massive practical implications if you don't have the ability to break up your immediacy, to
Yes.
reframe your situations,
Yeah.
to look at them
Yeah.
from new ways.
Yeah.
There's a way in which philosophy, I guess I would also say, just with the salt example, there's a way in which philosophy also kind of reminds me of a game you can play with children where, if I ask you, what is this bottle, for
Mhm.
example, and I say, oh, well, it's a football for mermaids. Or,
Okay.
oh, it's a balancing game, right? And you try to come up with as many things as you possibly can,
Yeah.
or it's a water gun and I squeeze it, right? Or it's something for mice to
It's a spinning
practice.
top.
It's a spinning top, or this is for mice to practice their balance on, or something, right? Like you come up with all of these and you go, oh, that's funny. And it's funny,
Mhm.
but it actually gives a certain revelation
Mhm.
that, if you wanted to be creative, you could see all of these
Mhm.
objects in many,
Mhm.
many different ways.
Mhm.
And it's crazy how, if you just put your mind to it, how many possibilities you can come up with.
Yeah.
Well, the same actually goes with your life situations. If you
Mhm.
actually put
Mhm.
your mind to it, you could come up with a
Yeah.
whole lot of possibilities. We just never do.
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
we think it's a waste of time. We think
Yes.
it's silly. Isn't that just a silly game I just did there? Yeah, it's a silly game, but
Yeah.
it's really going to be quite useful if you're able to add possibilities to your life
Mhm. Mhm.
circumstance. If you can't do that, I think it's very consequential. I think what I was going to say earlier, and I'll say this as we come to the close
Mhm.
here, is that like, what does it mean to say that life is romantic?
Mhm.
I guess I have the image in some respects of a gymnast
Mhm.
or a great athlete. Like a gymnast goes into the air, they do all these spins and twirls, and they stick it. They
Mhm.
like stick the landing.
Mhm.
There's
Mhm.
something about life feels romantic when it feels alive and daring, and you don't know what's going to happen, and
Mhm.
it sticks the landing.
Mhm.
Like when you go in a
Mhm.
conversation, you don't know what you're going to say, and it
Yeah.
goes here and it goes there, and it sticks the landing.
Yeah. Or
Like
just a moment where you're like, "I'm not sure I'm gonna land."
yeah, and then it
Yeah,
does,
and then
right?
yeah.
By definition, that requires a flow of movement, a free
Mhm.
flow. So you can't have things stuck in their immediacy.
Mhm.
Your conversations can't be stuck in their immediacy or their
Mhm.
frameworks or their
Mhm.
determinations or their everydayness, as
Mhm.
Heidegger might say, right? So if reality is going to have this experience of gymnastics,
Mhm.
and I think it is interesting that gymnasium and gymnastics have a long
Yeah.
history in philosophy, then you have to let things move.
Mhm.
And if they can move, they might, a gymnast may not stick the landing. They may
Mhm.
fall. They may
Mhm.
hurt themselves,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
But without that freedom of movement, then things don't feel enchanted. Like
Mhm.
I think
Mhm.
there is something. I'd be curious your thoughts. I
Mhm.
think there is something about the feeling of enchantment that is tied to experiencing life around you as kind of full of that kind of gymnastic-like activity.
Mhm. No, yeah, I mean, I think 100%, 100%. And actually, even as you were talking, just randomly, some things were coming to mind where I'm like, that's actually something that I often like put in a kind of I can find that to some sort of experience and like what if I got curious with that? And I think the going back, we have mentioned that word many times, but to me, that is like curiosity is a type of movement. It's allowing
Yeah,
things to
absolutely.
something you feel is couldn't be any other way suddenly can. It's like it is truly miraculous, and that's how you feel when you see like excellent gymnasts what they do, and it's like how are they doing that? They make it look so easy too, but it's actually because of their practice. They've developed the muscles that they have so they can execute what they're doing, and it looks like they're defying gravity and they're like they're a superhuman, and then they stick the landing, and it's just like this. It's a beautiful moment. It's a bravo moment. But I do think movement is huge. I do think movement itself is huge, and I think that yeah, maybe we're just scared to fall. Again, we're
Yeah,
just
yeah.
scared. We're scared to fall, and but when we allow the movement, that's when things become more alive again. And of course, our bodies and our hearts are always moving. Our blood is always flowing, so it's always an in movement. But when we allow our thoughts themselves about X person, about X thing, about X task to be more fluid, to be able to move and be played with, I think we're going to open up so many more possibilities for life and even for resolution to things
I
that
agree. I agree. So what are the 3 or 5 steps, adding philosophy to your life? Like, so what like, first, go pick up a salt shaker,
yeah,
ask, "What is it?"
yeah,
What would you say?
yeah. I mean, I think that would be a good thing to do. You could just give yourself some prompts. So when you say, okay, well, just pick an object in a room, pick any object. You could also pick a task. You know, sit with it. Think. Take a minute to, even if you want to sit, close your eyes, take a deep breath, think about that object, think about that task, and start to ask yourself, you know, what is it? What does it relate to for me? Like maybe do that. Like branch out. What does it make you think about? What are a couple things it makes you think about? And then maybe another step could be to consider what it might be. Is there something that you are learning from that thing?
Mm,
Um, And then a fourth thing is like, is there a way in which you could relate to it differently so that you could have more curiosity and more gratitude ultimately
Hmm.
too? So those might be the steps.
So
Take
put a salt shaker on the
yeah,
dinner
get.
table
Hmm.
with the kids around in the family, go around to
Well,
each
we
one.
certainly do that.
Yeah, yeah,
We
yeah.
do.
So what is the salt shaker?
Yes.
How do you relate to the salt shaker?
Hmm.
How are
Or
ways
and
you
what are
could
things it makes you think about? So let it branch out. Like, what are just some associative thoughts you
yeah.
have with the salt shaker? Okay, what's something you might learn from the salt shaker? Like, what does it do on a regular basis, or what does it do to you, or what? How does it
You can
make you
even have one
feel?
where it's like, what is salt metaphorically? Because
Oh
I think a
yeah,
lot of freedom, I think our language is structured by our metaphors
yes,
without us
yes.
realizing it. So training in, I think philosophy
Well,
trains you in metaphor.
yeah. And
Yeah,
when you asked me about salt, one of the first things that came to mind is being the salt of the
yeah,
earth in
right,
Scripture. So
right.
you can think about that. Like, what is it metaphorically? What is it usually represented for humans over time?
Yes.
You know?
Hmm. Yeah, thinking of it metaphorically, how
Yes.
to think of it differently.
Yeah.
Yeah,
How to
and
relate
then
to it differently. And I do think even if the shift is just a gratitude, an increased gratitude for that person, for that
mhm,
thing, for that task, that's going to be huge.
yeah. So what are the how many questions? So what are the questions? Is it five first?
Steps,
Yeah,
well, the step one is get the object,
right.
or relate, get yourself a task you need to do. Then you're going to ask yourself, what is that thing? Right?
Mm-hmm.
What it gets Socratic, make feel uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What is that thing? Then you let yourself think about what it makes you think about. Um, that could also include the metaphors. What does it
Sure.
mean metaphorically? And then thinking about how does it make you feel to engage with that thing?
Mm,
How could it make you feel?
mm,
And then maybe the last one would be, um, oh, did I include? I don't think I'd include this. What could you learn from it?
mm, mm,
Maybe that should be before the gratitude.
yeah.
So, and then right, the gratitude, and then, um, yeah, I think that the gratitude could be. I'm not sure if the final step should be how could you relate to it differently.
Mm-hmm.
But that I think that would be possibly its own distinct step.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to put in the comments these steps or additional
I,
steps, that would be cool.
yeah, if you have
Uh,
any ideas on steps
yeah,
that
that
you
would
think would
be
be helpful,
cool. We might in the video description put something
yeah,
or Instagram or something.
absolutely. I might
The
have some
claim
sort of.
that we are making is
Mhm.
that these steps could be used on anything,
I
any
can make a little
phenomenon.
PDF if anyone
There you
wants
go.
to get it.
Just DM her. So
Yeah,
there you go. Is that these steps now? Of course, the claim we are also making is that these steps actually are what you should bring into relationships. So can you restate those statements with your husband or your
yeah,
wife or your friend?
yeah,
So what would it be
yeah.
with your friend?
So right, so you think about that person, then you ask, who is that person? Right? Who is that person to you? Who is that person to them? Probably just think about maybe what do they think they are to themselves, and who are they maybe to the community, or like the greater nexus, the family or something like that, or the group or the workplace or whatever it is. Then think about what they make you think about.
Hmm, right.
What does that person make you think about? These could be like keywords, these could be concepts. Um, this could also be, how do they make you feel? And then how could you relate to that person differently? Or like, what if you saw them, like, what if you met them when they were 4 years old or
Hmm.
something?
Yeah,
Could
yeah, yeah.
be with
Hmm.
people, you could get kind of, there could be some creativity there. Like, there could be some interesting things to do there. Or
Hmm.
like, what if this is the first time you're ever meeting them?
Hmm.
Or what if you had amnesia and you're meeting them for the first time? Something like that. I always thought that was a very helpful thought
Yeah, yeah,
experiment.
yeah, yeah.
Like, would you treat somebody better if you literally like
Yeah,
lost your memory in the hospital, and like you're treated like that's scary?
yeah. But
But it's important.
yeah,
It's a really
but
important
it's
thought experiment.
very often true. Like we treat strange. Well,
Yeah.
Dostoevsky's about this. It's easier to treat. Sometimes, often, it's easier to
Mhm.
treat strangers nicer than
Yeah.
your spouse.
Let me just include the last two
Yeah.
steps. What can I learn from them? And then how can I incorporate some gratitude toward them?
Hmm.
I think those are the steps. I will craft something so that
Yeah.
people have
So
these steps, because it's
so
it's something you can regularly, routinely do to practice philosophizing.
yeah, and the claim is that if your relationships, friendships, marriage is stale, then the claim is that philosophy is about breaking those things open. And I
So
mean
yeah,
that is the claim.
I was thinking about doing like a post like, do you think life do you think life sucks?
You go outside and the sky is blue only to everyone but you.
Yes, blue in the
How could you
in the
and
blue glue.
sadness.
Yeah, yes, blue.
Yeah, well, the claim is that philosophy is dealing. It is a certain skill set that is practical,
Yes,
that is
exactly.
practical,
Yeah.
that is dealing with the lack of
Enchantment.
enchantment in reality in the
Mhm,
world
mhm.
and the stuckness in marriage. It's the
Exactly.
same problem.
And thinking that realizing everything has something for you. Like, I guess for me, these steps could be like, well, that's interesting to think of this as philosophizing, but every great philosopher was asking these types of they were asking these questions about being. They were
Yep.
asking these
Mhm.
questions about existence. They
Yep.
were asking these questions, or Hegel would go around to all the other subjects and
Yeah.
sit in on many other classes just to
Yeah.
learn because he knew that had something for
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
So what do these things have, for you, and how can you change your orientation? Because you by changing your orientation, you're going to change you're going to be able to change reality as you perceive it, as you experience it.
I
um
would argue that a way to view this would have to be justified, but Hegel's absolute idealism invites you to, when you look at the salt shaker, to ask, how is this for me? In the sense of, I'm experiencing this thing,
hmm,
I've learned about this thing, and in some way it is for me to
like
learn something
I
about
need
my,
it.
I
Yeah.
need this salt
And
shaker.
that's so funny. Somebody's for me. It sounds so possessive. It sounds so like,
Mm-hmm.
for me, it's mine,
But
power.
you're
But it's
wounded.
actually, you're wounded in this.
Yeah.
You're humbled
Yeah.
in this. It's for you because you need it.
Yes.
Like you need this like a good dose of medicine or something like that. You
Oh,
need
yeah,
it
I
like the
need
sun.
this. I
You need
need
it
this
like a good
laundry.
meal or
I
something
need
like,
this
I need
laundry.
it.
I need
I
this
need this.
person I think
Exactly.
that this person I think is wrong. I need, right?
Exactly.
Yes,
Exactly.
yes,
Exactly.
yes,
And this is
yes.
the power. This is the power
Yeah,
of
because
philosophizing.
basically, again, without philosophy, you're still going to have rationality. You're
Exactly.
still going to think.
It's good.
And
Yes.
your natural way is to think, it is rational to think of the person that you think is wrong as bad, as someone you want to get away from, as someone who has nothing to teach you.
Hmm.
Philosophy introduces the non-rational possibility that gets you out of that Nash equilibria, that no, actually that person you think is wrong is for you. You need that person. You are wounded. You
Hmm.
can't know what you don't know. You're
Exactly.
full of self-deception. You need that soul seeker. You
Hmm.
need that
Hmm.
person different from you.
Hmm.
Uh, but you need to be
Yeah.
able to think about how they are for you in a way that is beyond immediate everydayness, because
Hmm.
immediate
Hmm.
everydayness would say get away from them, push
Yeah.
them away, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
So in this way, love and philosophy are deeply tied together.
Absolutely.
But it's been fun. I've
It's
enjoyed.
basically, if your life sucks, if your life sucks, philosophize your life.
Yeah, we're just saying.
Just
Just throwing that out there. Have you tried? Um, yeah, and again, I will also note another way that the philosopher, and but the philosopher is accused of thinking too much.
mm,
But I would argue they're just making explicit what everyone is implicitly doing. They're just
mm-hmm.
making it visible.
Yes.
Likewise, philosophers are often associated with existential, Camus, Kafka, sad and miserable and whatever. Well, they're just often just making explicit what everyone is actually feeling.
Hmm.
And now there's kind of a permission mental health kind of
Hmm.
therapy culture. Philosophers are like, no, that's actually what's going on all the time
Hmm.
inside of people. The
Hmm.
philosopher is just making it visible.
Hmm.
Now, should they have made it visible in that way in some particular manifestations? I'll leave that up to you.
Yeah.
But I would argue Ecclesiastes is the first existential text. I
Yeah.
think Philip Yancey made that point, and I agree
Hmm.
with him. And so also another reason why, just as a closing before I forget, like I think some people don't do philosophy because they're like, well, it will make me miserable. It will
Hmm.
make
Hmm.
me
I mean, people
unhappy.
people say that about journaling. Like, I don't want to journal because I'm scared of the stuff that I'm going to say
Yeah.
or that I'm thinking. Like, you're scared of your own thoughts.
Yeah, and Kierkegaard's basically
Yeah.
like, no, 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 you're actually are miserable and just don't know it. Like, so
Hmm.
the philosopher,
Hmm.
so it's not that philosophy makes you miserable, it's that actually you are and just don't know it. It's just under repression.
Hmm.
He has that idea that the man in despair doesn't know they're in
Yeah.
despair, right? And so there's
Yeah.
also that going
But
on.
through the cross is the
Yeah.
ascension,
Mhm.
is the
Yeah.
resurrection and the ascension. I mean, that's the thing. It's not okay. So it's not to just now know you're miserable to just stay there.
Yeah, but
I
to
mean, I guess you
get
could
you
choose
through it.
that if you
Yeah,
wanted
yeah, yeah.
to,
But
but
philosophy is
it's
not
to
about
get
that.
through
Yeah,
that. It's to
to
get
get through
through
that.
that, to the
Mhm.
wonder and to
There is a claim, I think, in philosophy and certainly in many religions that if you don't face the miserable, then you are miserable. You're doomed. Like
mm,
it's a
yeah,
certain damnation,
yeah.
right? So again, another reason why I think like this idea of philosophy helping with enchantment, no, philosophy makes you existentially miserable or whatever. No, it just makes that existential misery explicit and visible precisely to get through it.
Yeah.
And the claim is if you don't make it visible and you don't think it and face it, then it will be there. It'll
Hmm.
still be there, and you won't be able to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And it will get you. So I was thinking of that before
Yeah.
I closed. But anyway, this has been
Excellent.
fun.
Yeah, it's been a
Good
lot
seeing
of
you.
fun, babe.
I've
Thank
enjoyed
you.
it.
Thank you all so much.
For more by OG Rose, please visit ogrose.com.
Hmm.
Spotify.
Spotify,
That's the first time I've said that.
Twitter,
Twitter, Instagram,
Instagram.
Amazon. We did release Third Thoughts recently at the end of December. All
Yes.
purchase. You don't have to read the first two books. They are all assorted essays. I'd say First Thoughts is 100 little short pieces about a bunch of different topics. Second Thoughts has essays on economics and so on. Third Thoughts has a lot on theology,
Mhm,
ethics,
mhm,
stuff like that. But there are assorted collections. All purchases and reviews are a big deal. All
mhm,
reviews are a really big deal.
mhm.
If you purchased any of our books on Amazon and would not mind leaving a review, it is a big deal.
We appreciate
You
it,
just go
yeah.
to your order history.
Or maybe just hit the start if you don't if you're like, I'm pressed for
Yeah, if
time,
you don't want to
just
write
give a
something, just
star
do a
review.
start.
Yeah,
That's
if
great. And
that
you
would be,
go
really appreciated.
order history, write product review, whatever, it's there. Really appreciate it. And we do have our class at Parallax that
Yes.
will be starting in January.
Wonderful.
We really are looking forward to
Yes,
that on
very, very
writing,
honored.
creative writing.
Yeah.
So that'll be a blast. But thank you all.
Thank you all so much.